The old mining tunnels of Kepler 442b echoed with the sound of pickaxes hitting rock. 12-year-old Damon wiped sweat from his forehead as he sorted through another pile of crystal fragments. The orphan camp had been his home for as long as he could remember, and every day felt exactly the same. Wake up before dawn, work in the tunnels until your hands bled, eat whatever scraps the hegemony guards threw at you, then collapse on your thin mattress and dream of somewhere better. Today felt different though. Damon couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him from the shadows of the mine. The other kids felt it too. Tanya kept looking over her shoulder, and even Big Jerome seemed jumpy. The crystal fragments they were sorting seemed to pulse with a faint light that hadn't been there yesterday. "Hey Damon, check this one out," whispered Keisha, holding up a piece of crystal that was definitely glowing. It was beautiful, like trapped starlight, and warm to the touch. The hegemony supervisors were busy arguing about production quotas, so nobody was watching the kids closely. Damon reached for the crystal, but as his fingers touched its surface, a sharp edge cut deep into his palm. Blood welled up and dripped onto the crystal's facete surface. Instead of staining the crystal red, his blood seemed to disappear into it, absorbed like water into a sponge. The crystal blazed with sudden light, so bright that Damon had to close his eyes. When he opened them again, the crystal had gone dark, but something had changed. He could feel it in his bones, like a vibration that went all the way down to his soul. The other kids were staring at him with wide eyes. "Damon, you're cut," Tanya gasped. He looked down at his hand. The deep gash was gone, leaving only smooth, unbroken skin. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was the voice he could hear in his head, distant but growing stronger by the second. It wasn't speaking words he recognized, but somehow he understood it anyway. "Wake up. Wake up. The bonded calls. Wake up." 3,000 light-years away, in the crystal caverns of a world that had been dead for millennia, something ancient stirred. Massive eyelids, each one the size of a spacecraft, slowly opened. Hearts that hadn't beaten in 3,000 years began to pulse with renewed life. Wings that could blot out sun stretched and flexed, shaking dust from scales harder than diamond. Corvin was the first to fully awaken. The great dragon had been dreaming of the old days, when humans and dragons soared through the galaxy together as partners and friends. Those dreams had been all he had for so long that he'd almost forgotten they were memories, not fantasies. But now something had changed. The quantum crystals embedded in his chest were singing with harmonics he hadn't heard since the Great Betrayal. Somewhere in the galaxy, a human child was calling for help, and the call resonated in every dragon's soul. Brothers, sisters, Corvin's mental voice reached out to the hundreds of sleeping dragons around him. The time of waiting is over. The bonded have returned to us. One by one, the great creatures began to wake. Their living ships, grown from the same crystalline matrix as their hearts, began to hum with power. Ancient systems that had slumbered for millennia came online, ready to serve their masters once again. Back on Kepler 442b, Damon was trying to act normal, but it was getting harder by the minute. The voice in his head was getting stronger, and now there were multiple voices, all calling to him in that strange language he somehow understood. The hegemony guards had noticed that something was wrong with the crystals. They were all glowing now, pulsing in rhythm with Damon's heartbeat. "All humans back to quarters, now," barked Supervisor Vex, his forearms gesturing angrily at the children. "Something's wrong with the equipment." As Damon walked back to the dormitory with the other kids, he felt eyes on him. Not human eyes, not hegemony eyes, but something much older and more powerful. He looked up at the night sky through the dome of the mining facility and could have sworn he saw shapes moving between the stars. "You okay, man?" Jerome asked, putting a protective arm around the younger boy's shoulders. "You've been acting weird since you cut your hand." Damon wanted to tell his friend about the voices, about the feeling that something incredible was about to happen. But how could he explain something he didn't understand himself? Instead, he just nodded and tried to smile. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired." But as he lay on his narrow bunk that night, staring up at the ceiling, Damon knew that nothing would ever be fine again. The voices were getting closer, and with them came something that the galaxy hadn't seen in 3,000 years. Something that would change everything. In the depths of space, Corvin spread his wings and roared a challenge that echoed across dimensions. The dragons were coming home. 3 days had passed since Damon's blood touched the crystal, and the mining facility was in chaos. Equipment that hadn't worked properly in years was suddenly running at full capacity. Ancient computers were booting up on their own, displaying information in languages nobody recognized. The hegemony supervisors were panicking, calling in specialists from across the sector. Damon tried to keep his head down and act normal, but it was impossible. Every piece of technology he got near started behaving strangely. When he walked past the food dispensers, they would activate and offer him choices that weren't supposed to exist. Doors opened for him before he even touched the controls. The other kids were starting to notice. "It's like the machines know you're coming," whispered Tanya as they watched an elevator arrive without being called. "What did you do to that crystal?" Before Damon could answer, the facility's main computer system came to life with a sound like thunder. Holographic displays materialized throughout the cafeteria, showing star maps and historical records that made everyone gasp. The images showed humans living in magnificent cities among the stars, commanding vast fleets of ships, and working alongside creatures that looked like something out of ancient mythology. "Dragons," breathed Jerome, staring at the hologram of a massive winged creature soaring through space. "Those are actual dragons." The hegemony guards rushed in, shouting orders and trying to shut down the displays, but the computers wouldn't respond to them. The holograms kept playing, showing scene after scene of humans and dragons working together, building wonders that spanned entire solar systems. Dr. Chen, the facility's chief scientist, pushed through the crowd with her scanning equipment. Her readings were off the charts. "The quantum signature is unlike anything I've ever seen," she muttered, pointing her scanner at different parts of the room. When she aimed it at Damon, the device started smoking and died completely. "You," she said, staring at him with wide eyes. "You're the source." Meanwhile, deep in space, Corvin was learning the truth about what had happened to humanity. The great dragon accessed the memory crystals hidden in his ship's core, absorbing 3,000 years of suppressed history. What he found there made his ancient heart burn with rage. The humans hadn't been conquered in a fair war. They had been betrayed by species they trusted, attacked while their guard was down, and then systematically enslaved. The hegemony had spent centuries erasing every trace of humanity's glorious past, rewriting history to make humans look like primitive servants who had always been inferior. "Lies?" Corvin growled, his voice shaking the crystal walls of his ship. "All lies." The memory crystals showed him the location of every human settlement, every slave colony, every place where his former partners had been reduced to cheap labor. Hundreds of worlds, billions of people, all living in ignorance of their true heritage. But they also showed him something else. Hidden in the genetic code of every human was a dormant connection to the dragons, a quantum link that had been suppressed by hegemony technology. The boy on Kepler 442b wasn't just any human. His bloodline carried the strongest traces of the original bond, the ancient partnership that had once made humans and dragons the most powerful force in the galaxy. Back on the mining world, things were getting dangerous for Damon. The facility commander, a brutal hegemony officer named Vexren, had arrived with a squad of elite guards. He studied the still-running holographic displays with cold eyes. "Shut it down," he ordered his technicians. "All of it." "We can't, sir," one of them replied nervously. "The systems aren't responding to our commands. It's like they're being controlled by something else." Vexren's gaze fell on Damon, who was trying to hide behind the other kids. "Bring me the boy," he commanded. The scans show the anomaly started with him. As the guards moved toward Damon, every piece of technology in the room suddenly went berserk. Lights flashed, alarms blared, and the holographic displays multiplied until the entire cafeteria was filled with images of humanity's forgotten glory. The guards stumbled backward, overwhelmed by the chaos. In that moment of confusion, Damon felt something new. The voices in his head weren't just calling to him anymore. They were getting closer. Much closer. "They're coming," he whispered, not sure how he knew but absolutely certain it was true. "They're coming for us." Tanya grabbed his arm. "Who's coming, Damon? What's happening?" Before he could answer, the facility's external sensors started screaming warnings. Something massive had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Something that registered on their instruments as both alive and artificial, bigger than any ship in the hegemony fleet. Commander Vexren's face went pale as he read the sensor data. According to their computers, they were looking at something that had been extinct for 3,000 years. Something that shouldn't exist. A dragon ship was heading their way, and it wasn't alone. The hegemony research station orbiting Kepler 442b had never seen anything like it. Commander Vexren had ordered Damon transferred there immediately after the dragon ships appeared on their sensors. The boy now sat in a sterile white room, surrounded by more scanning equipment than he'd ever seen in his life. Every few minutes, another scientist would rush in with new readings that made no sense. "His genetic markers are impossible," Dr. Reeves muttered, staring at her tablet. "These sequences haven't been active in the human genome for thousands of years. It's like his DNA is remembering something it forgot long ago. Damon tried not to be scared, but it was hard when everyone kept staring at him like he was some kind of monster. The voices in his head had gotten so loud he could barely think. They weren't speaking English, but somehow he understood every word. They were angry. They were coming. And they were bringing friends. Through the station's thick walls, he could feel vibrations that seemed to shake reality itself. The dragon ships were getting closer, and with each passing hour, more ancient technology throughout the station was coming online. Control panels that had been dark for decades suddenly blazed with light. Computer systems began displaying star charts and tactical information that no one had programmed into them. "Sir, we're detecting 17 more ships," reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice tight with fear. "They're not following any known flight patterns. They're moving like living creatures." Commander Vexrin studied the tactical display with growing alarm. The dragon ships were enormous, each one easily the size of a hegemony dreadnought, but they moved through space with fluid grace that no artificial vessel could match. Their hulls seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as the fragments the mining crews had been collecting, but these crystals pulsed within a light like massive hearts. "What do they want?" Vexrin asked, though part of him already knew the answer. His question was answered when the largest of the dragon ships moved into communication range. The station's main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a vessel unlike anything in hegemony records. The walls were alive, covered in crystalline growths that pulsed with different colors. And standing at the center of it all was something that should have been extinct. Corvin was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. His scales were deep blue-black like the void between stars, and his eyes glowed with ancient intelligence. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, resonating through the station's hull like thunder. "I am Corvin, first wing of the Dragon Guard," the great creature announced. "You hold one of the bonded. Release him to us, and we will depart in peace." Commander Vexrin tried to maintain his authority, but his voice cracked slightly. "This is a hegemony facility. The human is our prisoner under interstellar law." Corvin's laugh was like an earthquake. "Your laws mean nothing to us, little commander. We were ancient when your species was learning to use fire. The boy you hold carries the blood of our partners, our friends, our family. We will have him back." In his cell, Damon felt something incredible happening. The voice in his head wasn't just a voice anymore. It was a presence, warm and protective, like having a big brother who could tear apart spaceships with his bare hands. Without really thinking about it, he placed his palm against the wall and whispered, "Corvin?" The dragon's massive head turned toward the camera, and for a moment, it seemed like he was looking directly at Damon through the station's hull. "Yes, young one. I hear you. We all hear you." Suddenly, Damon wasn't alone in his cell anymore. Not physically, but mentally. He could feel other presences joining the connection, dozens of them, then hundreds. Each dragon that added their voice to the mental link made him feel stronger, more complete, like pieces of himself he'd never known were missing were finally falling into place. Through this new connection, he saw flashes of memory that weren't his own. Humans and dragons soaring through nebulae together, building cities that floated in space, exploring distant galaxies as partners and equals. He saw the betrayal too, the moment when everything went wrong, when the hegemony species turned on humanity and tried to wipe them from history. "They lied to everyone," Damon said aloud, tears streaming down his face. "They made everyone forget what humans used to be." Dr. Reeves, who was monitoring him through the cell's cameras, leaned forward. "What are you talking about, boy? What do you see?" But before Damon could answer, the station shuddered as something massive attached itself to the hull. Through the mental link, he felt Corvin's satisfaction. "We're coming for you, young speaker," the dragon's voice filled his mind. "Hold on just a little longer." The rescue had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The rescue of Damon from the Hegemony Research Station sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Within hours, grainy security footage of dragons tearing through steel bulkheads was being shared on every underground network humanity had. For the first time in 3,000 years, humans everywhere were seeing their legendary protectors in action. Aboard Corvin's living ship, the Eternal Dawn *, Damon stood in what the dragon called the Heart Chamber. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and he could feel the ship's consciousness all around him like a gentle embrace. It was nothing like the cold, mechanical vessels of the hegemony. This ship was alive, aware, and happy to have humans aboard again. "Place your hand here, young speaker," Corvin said, indicating a crystalline panel that seemed to grow from the ship's organic hull. "Let the *Dawn* learn your voice." When Damon touched the crystal, light exploded through the chamber. Suddenly, he wasn't just connected to Corvin anymore. He could feel every dragon ship in the fleet, dozens of ancient minds welcoming him home. Through their quantum-linked consciousness, he could sense something even more incredible. Across hundreds of worlds, humans were beginning to remember. On Earth, construction worker Leon Williams was having the strangest day of his life. The building site where he worked had been excavated from ancient bedrock, and lately, the heavy machinery had been acting weird. Today, when he climbed into his excavator, the controls responded to his thoughts before he even touched them. The massive machine moved with fluid precision, like it was an extension of his own body. "Leon, how are you doing that?" his foreman shouted over the noise. The excavator was performing maneuvers that should have been impossible, lifting and placing massive concrete blocks with the delicacy of a surgeon. Leon couldn't explain it. He just knew what the machine needed to do, and somehow, it knew too. Deep underground, systems that had been dormant for millennia were waking up, responding to the quantum signature that marked him as one of the bonded. Similar awakenings were happening everywhere. On the agricultural world of New Eden, farmhand Keisha Roberts watched in amazement as the automated harvesters began working in perfect synchronization, following patterns she could see in her mind like glowing pathways. On the mining stations of the Cygnus sector, processor Tyrone Jackson discovered he could communicate with the extraction equipment through touch, making the machines work 10 times more efficiently than their programming allowed. But the hegemony wasn't about to let this revolution continue unchecked. Admiral Zextar, Supreme Commander of the Hegemony Fleet, had watched the Dragon rescue with growing alarm. These creatures represented everything the Hegemony had worked to suppress. If humans remembered their true potential, the carefully maintained balance of power would collapse overnight. "Deploy the punishment fleets," Zextar ordered his subordinates. "Target every human settlement in the Outer Rim. If they want their legends back, they can watch them burn." The first strikes hit the farming colonies hardest. Massive orbital bombardments turned peaceful settlements into craters of molten glass. The message was clear: surrender the boy and the dragons, or watch humanity burn world by world. Aboard the Eternal Dawn Damon felt every death like a physical blow. The mental link that connected him to the Dragon fleet also connected him to humans across the galaxy, and their pain became his pain. Tears streamed down his face as he watched the casualty reports coming in. "They're killing innocent people because of me," he sobbed, his small fists clenched in fury. "We have to stop them." Corvin lowered his massive head until he was eye level with the boy. "Young speaker, this war began long before you were born. The hegemony has kept our people enslaved for 3,000 years. These attacks only prove that they fear what we might become together." Around them, the other dragons were arriving through hyperspace, their living ships materializing like falling stars. Each arrival brought new hope and new horror, as the awakening human population began to discover abilities they never knew they possessed, while hegemony forces responded with increasingly brutal suppression. "How many of us are there?" Damon asked, feeling the vast network of consciousness expanding around him. "More than they know," Corvin replied. The bonded bloodline was scattered across the galaxy during the Great Exile. 1 in every 1,000 humans carries the genetic markers, though most have never activated them. But you, young speaker, you are different. You carry the pure line, the direct connection to the first dragon speakers. Through you, we can awaken them all. Damon looked out through the ship's transparent hull at the growing fleet of dragon vessels. Each ship carried dozens of the great creatures, warriors and scholars and engineers who had slept for millennia waiting for this moment. But they weren't enough. The hegemony had billions of ships, trillions of soldiers. "We need the humans to remember everything," Damon said quietly. "Not just the machines, but who they really are." Corvin's eyes blazed with ancient fire. "Then let us remind them, young speaker. Let us show the galaxy what humanity was meant to be." The final battle for humanity's freedom began above Earth itself. Admiral Zextar had assembled the largest fleet in hegemony history, thousands of warships arranged in perfect formation around humanity's birthworld. Their weapons were charged and ready to turn the blue planet into a lifeless rock. The message had been broadcast across every human settlement in the galaxy: surrender the boy and the dragons, or watch Earth die. But Zextar had made one crucial mistake. He thought this was just about one human boy and some ancient creatures. He didn't understand that Damon had become something far more powerful than anyone imagined. Through the quantum link that connected all the dragons, the young speaker had touched the minds of millions of humans across the galaxy. And they were all waking up. On Earth, construction worker Leon Williams felt the change first. He was supposed to be in a bunker like everyone else, hiding from the hegemony fleet overhead. Instead, he found himself drawn to the massive construction mechs parked at his worksite. When he placed his hands on the control interface of the largest machine, it didn't just respond to his commands. It transformed. The construction mecha's industrial arms reconfigured themselves into weapons systems. Its armor plating shifted and strengthened. Most incredibly, it began to fly, anti-gravity systems that had been dormant for thousands of years suddenly coming online. Leon laughed with pure joy as he soared into the sky, no longer just a construction worker but a warrior defending his home. Across Earth's surface, the same transformation was happening everywhere. Factory workers like Angela Davis found themselves commanding manufacturing plants that began producing weapons and ships from blueprints stored in humanity's genetic memory. Farmers like Robert Chen watched their automated equipment reshape itself into defensive systems. Children in schools placed their hands on computer terminals and suddenly had access to tactical knowledge that military academies couldn't teach. But the real shock came when the Dragon fleet emerged from hyperspace. Damon stood beside Corvin in the heart chamber of the Eternal Dawn *, his small hand pressed against the ship's living crystal core. Through the mental link, he could feel every human on Earth and beyond, their consciousness awakening to possibilities they'd never dreamed of. The fear and confusion of the past few days had been replaced by something much more powerful, hope. "Are you ready, young speaker?" Corvin asked, his ancient voice filled with pride and affection. Damon nodded, though he was only 13 and about to address the entire galaxy. "Let's show them who we really are." The quantum broadcast began, Damon's voice carried by Dragon technology to every world, every ship, every settlement where humans lived. But he wasn't just speaking with words. Through the mental link, he was sharing memories, emotions, and truth itself. "My name is Damon Brooks," he began, his young voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "I'm nobody special. I'm just an orphan from a mining camp who found out that everything we've been told about ourselves is a lie." As he spoke, the Dragon fleet moved into battle formation around Earth. But these weren't the crude metal ships of the hegemony. Each Dragon vessel was a living work of art, their crystalline hulls pulsing within a light, their movements as graceful as dancers despite their massive size. 3,000 years ago, humans and dragons built wonders together, Damon continued, his broadcast showing visions of the ancient partnership. "We explored galaxies, created technologies that could heal entire planets, and brought peace to countless worlds. The hegemony destroyed all of that because they were afraid of what we could become." Admiral Zextar watched in horror as his own senses showed impossible readings. Human settlements across the galaxy were powering up defense systems that shouldn't exist. Ancient shipyards that had been disguised as asteroid fields were launching vessels of incredible power. Worst of all, some of his own human crew members were abandoning their posts, their eyes glowing with the same light he'd seen in the Dragon crystals. "Fire on the planet!" Zextar screamed. "Destroy them all!" But as the hegemony weapons charged, something extraordinary happened. The Dragon ships didn't move to intercept the attack. Instead, they began to sing. It was a sound unlike anything the galaxy had ever heard, a harmonic frequency that resonated through space itself. The Dragon's song reached every human consciousness, activating genetic memories that went back to the very beginning of their species. Suddenly, humans everywhere remembered not just their technology, but their courage, their compassion, and their unbreakable bonds with each other. The hegemony weapons fired, but the energy beams never reached Earth. A shield of pure light surrounded the planet, generated not by machines but by the combined will of every awakened human on its surface. Leon Williams and millions like him raised their hands to the sky, their consciousness linked through Damon's network, their power magnified beyond imagination. "We are the children of Earth and the friends of dragons," Damon's voice echoed across the galaxy. "We choose freedom over slavery, hope over fear, and love over hatred. And we will never kneel again." The hegemony fleet began to crumble as human crew members throughout their ranks awakened to their true heritage. Ships defected by the hundreds, their human components finally remembering what they were fighting for. Those vessels that remained loyal found themselves facing not just dragons, but an entire species that had rediscovered its destiny among the stars. The battle was over before it truly began. The hegemony forces scattered, their alliance shattered by the revelation that the primitive humans they'd enslaved were actually their former teachers and protectors. Some species fled to distant galaxies. Others stayed to beg forgiveness and tried to rebuild the partnerships their ancestors had betrayed. As the last enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, Damon looked out at Earth's blue oceans and felt a peace he'd never known. The planet was safe, humanity was free, and the dragons were home. But more importantly, millions of human children would grow up knowing the truth about their heritage, never again forced to believe they were less than they truly were. Corvin nuzzled the boy gently with his massive snout. Well done, young speaker. The bond between our peoples is stronger than ever. Damon smiled, no longer the frightened orphan from the mining camps but the first dragon speaker of a new age. This is just the beginning, isn't it? The great dragon's laughter rumbled like distant thunder. Young one, for humanity and dragonkind together, there will be no end to the wonders we can create.